For years, we have been told such a story about wealth that most people haven't even realized it's a fable. This story has become so normalized, so subtly woven into our daily lives, that most of us don't feel the need to question its truth. The core of the fable is simple: believing that the numbers in a bank account are the ultimate measure of a person's life success, assuming we are a winner as the number grows. Yet the past, both the great economic upheavals and the intertwined stories of human lives, whispers something quite different. History is full of people who amassed mountains of money but collapsed and were forgotten at the slightest tremor. But in the same history, there are also people who, despite not possessing flashy riches, built something far more meaningful: true value. A kind of value that doesn't disappear when the storm hits, that remains standing even when the money melts away. When you grasp the difference between wealth and value, you see that the vast majority of people are running breathlessly after the wrong goal, and that this race often ends in disappointment. Now we come to dissect this delusion in one of history's most dazzling palaces, Louis XIV's France, the heart of Versailles. In the early 1700s, the Sun King had turned Versailles into the temple of European wealth. Gold plating, marble-adorned halls, dazzling gardens. The entire palace seemed to be created for a single purpose: to be a stunning manifestation of wealth. To maintain their status, nobles never excluded China's silk, the colony's sugar, or Bordeaux's wine from their tables. On the surface, France seemed incredibly rich, but this richness was like a thread of cotton, weak enough to break at the slightest pull. Because the country's economy relied on spoils from wars, revenue flowing from colonies, and heavy debts, the tax burden was almost entirely on the shoulders of the populace. The nobility and clergy avoided contributing. While Louis enchanted Europe with his splendor, the economic foundation of the country was decaying from within. Then, the Scottish financier John Law entered the stage. He aimed to save France's financial order with a paper money system and the Mississippi Company. Initially, everything seemed like a magical transformation. Numbers virtually danced on paper and fortunes multiplied overnight. Nobles, merchants, everyone thought they were suddenly passing through a gateway to limitless riches. However, this was not a genuine increase in value. The profits of the Mississippi Company were exaggerated, and the value of the lands in Louisiana was overstated. When confidence collapsed in 1720, the paper wealth instantly vanished. Those who had been captivated by the dream of quick money suffered a great catastrophe, but those who held productive land, a genuine skill, or a tangible commodity, weathered this turbulence relatively easier. This event is one of the clearest examples in modern European history demonstrating the chasm between apparent wealth and real value. And this story is not unique to France. In the 1920s, American investors thought the stock market was a staircase that only went up. Cars, radios, skyscrapers, all had become symbols of unstoppable progress. Bankers and speculators borrowed at astronomical levels, creating seemingly immense fortunes. Then, 1929 came, and that wealth disappeared in a single breath. Who remained standing? The same people again: farmers with land, factories producing basic necessities, businesses providing services that people would demand no matter the conditions. The lesson France ignored was also unseen by America. Money is not value itself. It is like a promise written upon value. When the real value underneath disappears, money loses its meaning. A large part of what we count as wealth today is also fragile. Stock prices fluctuate based on expectations. Real estate prices are dependent on interest rates and market psychology. The strength of currencies is only as great as the trust placed in the institutions that manage them. History has repeatedly proven how wealth turns into a cloud of dust when confidence collapses. Weimar Germany, Zimbabwe, Venezuela. Those who relied on local currencies were completely ruined, but those with real goods, land, production, or skills, manage to survive somehow. So, if that's what wealth is, what is value? Value is the power to produce, resilience, the capacity to be useful even when everyone else is panicking. It's a skill, a network of relationships, the ability to create a product or service. It's what gives you breathing room during tough times. It stands firm even when markets fall apart. It survives even when money loses its dominion. Because people always need value, need is the most real currency. One of the most striking examples of this difference is the Japan bubble of the 1980s. There was a time when the land beneath the Imperial Palace in Tokyo was worth more than all the real estate in California combined. Japanese companies were buying up enormous properties all over the world. On paper, Japan seemed unstoppable. But the bubble burst in 1991. Stocks crashed. Real estate hit rock bottom. Companies were ruined. Most of the paper wealth vanished, as if it had never existed. But Japan did not disappear, because the country still possessed something far more important: a work culture capable of world-class production, a strong industrial backbone, a disciplined and skilled society. This is what is called value. Value does not eliminate pain, but it leaves a solid foundation for you to start again. This distinction is vital today because the modern financial system deliberately confuses wealth and value. This confusion plays into the hands of the powerful. Governments want citizens to measure their strength not by their production capacity but by their bank balance. Companies steer people toward financial products, not toward developing real skills. As long as you confuse wealth with value, it is much easier to shake your system. In ancient Rome, wealthy senators owned large estates, but their true power came from controlling the city's indispensable needs, namely grain, olive oil, and wine. When Roman money depreciated, the power of those who only held coins melted away. But those who produced the basic necessities maintained their dominance. This situation remained the same during the hyperinflations of the 20th century and the market crashes of the 21st century. The reason most people do not achieve financial freedom is that they focus on accumulating wealth and neglect building value. They accumulate, but rarely ask the question, what is this accumulation really built upon? What foundation does it rest on? If your assets are completely dependent on a stock market, a single salary, or a currency that can lose value, you might not be as rich as you think. True financial freedom is not having your livelihood dependent on a system controlled by others. Today, this means diversifying value, not just investments. It might be owning land. It might be mastering a skill that will be needed even during crises. It might be building human relationships, connecting with the right communities. Each of these is far more permanent than the wealth that appears on paper. The people who care most about display are often the most fragile. History is full of examples of how those who hid no real value behind their splendor suddenly perished. Splendor exhibited without real richness is like a sandcastle washed away by the wave. This is where the real challenge and the real opportunity begins. The difference between wealth and value is not just a pleasant piece of historical knowledge. It is the line between those who stand firm in economic storms and those who are swept away. When you truly grasp this difference, you break free from illusions and gain the power to build something that can never be stolen from you. You stand firm even if the market crashes, money becomes worthless, or policy changes. Let's start by breaking the glittering lie the financial system sells you. A large number in your bank account does not make you secure. History is full of people who thought they were wealthy, but lost everything in an instant. In the Roman Empire, merchants thought they were building wealth by accumulating denarii. But as emperors made the currency progressively worthless to cover war costs, the silver content in the denarius disappeared. Prices rose, confidence collapsed, and the merchants realized too late that their savings were merely an illusion. The first lesson is very clear. Wealth measured in a currency you don't control can evaporate instantly. Weimar Germany is an even more extreme example. A worker paid at noon would see the price of bread double by the time they walked home. People carried banknotes in wheelbarrows not because they were rich, but because the money was worthless enough to burn as paper. The real wealth lay with those who had assets independent of the mark: land, gold, foreign currency, valuable goods. The same cycle continues today. In the 1980s in Japan, real estate and stock prices were beyond imagination. But the bubble burst and fortunes melted away. What does this tell you? Your house, your shares, the money you earn, all can gain value, fall, or be repriced overnight. Financial literacy is not about memorizing economic terms. It is about understanding the system. It is knowing how the visible and invisible mechanisms of central banks, governments, and the market can affect your assets. And then you start asking the question, if the system changes, what retains its value? The person who can ask this question is light years ahead of others, because most people live in numbers, not in realities. Those who emerged from the Great Depression of the 1930s were not just the ones who saved money. They were the ones with land, the ones who could produce, the ones who could turn a skill into a service. Being able to produce something people need during a crisis is much more powerful than relying on written contracts on paper. Real wealth is self-sustaining. It is not beholden to the mood of the market. But the modern world directs people toward glitter. High salary equals wealth. Big house equals security. Inflated portfolio equals lifelong comfort. These indicators are appealing, but misleading. The 2008 crisis brutally revealed that the wealth of millions who relied on overvalued homes was actually debt. So, where does this road lead? It brings you to two choices. The first is a personal choice. Will you chase wealth, or will you create value? The second is a systemic choice. Will you play by the system's rules, or will you define the game on your own terms? True financial freedom begins when a bad policy, a crash, or an interest rate wave cannot destroy your wealth. Look at things that have retained their value for centuries. Productive land, staple foods, skills difficult to automate, businesses that meet human needs, methods of storing value that are resistant to political manipulation. Gold in ancient times, oil in the 20th century, today information and intellectual property. Their common point is clear. If you own something someone else necessarily needs, your real wealth cannot be easily taken away. This is true freedom. Being able to preserve and grow your wealth even if the system changes. If one thing is to remain in your mind from this text, let it be this: wealth is not what you've been told it is. The financial system wins as long as you chase numbers, because numbers are easy to manipulate. But value is hard to manipulate. It is resilient against collapses, and most importantly, it still stands there when the fog clears. When you grasp the difference, you have seen the oldest game in economic history, because history does not repeat exactly, but if you don't understand its message, it can easily crush you. If this text has opened a new window for you, don't forget to subscribe. History has the answer. I will show you where to look.